Whenever you search for the top TV shows of all time, most of the time you get shows like The Sopranos, Breaking Bad, Mad Men, or in this case, The Wire. But when you start watching the show, you get so bored that you can't even finish one episode. Well, it's not entirely your fault. In fact, even when the show was initially airing, it lost most of its viewership in season 2 because of the novel type format it followed. But as time passed, people finally understood the importance of this show, and this guy also talked with the creator, David Simon himself, to understand and acknowledge the greatness of the show. And after a while, people finally gave it the attention it always deserved and it understood why it's one of the most important shows of the 21st century. And for you to understand what makes The Wire so special and watch it in a way you don't feel like you're watching it on gunpoint, you would have to consider all the pieces of the show. Most shows are focused on the internal psychology of the character. An obvious example is The Sopranos, where the whole plot of the show is based on Tony's therapy sessions, where Tony talks about how the strong silent type people are not there anymore while personally talking and complaining about little irrelevant things in life. This shows the contradictions and flaws in the Tony's character and makes the show special and makes us understand the inner mind of Tony Soprano. However, in The Wire, while characters are important, it focuses more on the macro view, how the system and institutions affect the lives of people. It basically focuses from everything, from how politics affect police and holds them off from doing real work and juke stats to look good, and how this promotes crime, to how the same politics also make schools juke their stats and promote rote learning, once again to look better for public. It's basically like nobody's allowed to do their real job and everybody is just focused on looking good to the outside, while in the inside things are ugly. The game is a term repeatedly used in the show. At first, you might think that this describes the drug gangs, but no, it rather describes the total corruption done by everybody, from a lawyer to a police officer to a politician, that work for their own personal gain and ignore the consequences to the society. The rules of the game are the same everywhere. The more corrupt you will become, the more ruthless you will become, the more successful you will be. And the more you do your job and be moral, the more you'll regress in the social hierarchy. For example, when McNulty tries to do actual police work, he faces blowback from the higher ups. And when the higher up himself, the politician Tommy Karkidi, tries to do something, he will have to face blowback himself. Because actual change is slow and gradual. It can't happen in the span of a few months. It is a process that takes time, effort, and investment to actually work. But at last, nobody has the patience and even the hard will required to do all these things. And the politician also have to win the election. So, Tommy Karkati prioritizes winning the election more than the development. And that was the fall of Tommy Karkati morals. Unlike the mayor Tommy Kalkiti, who had problems of his own before becoming a politician, which includes extreme self worship and having a moral superiority complex over everyone, Frank Sabotka was an honest working man. He was the Union Secretary Treasurer of the International Brotherhood of Stevedores, whose sole purpose was to save his people and the port of Baltimore from becoming irrelevant. The city and the state had abandoned the working class. There was no funding for the port, and the politicians were only interested in building condos with coastal views for rich people in place of the port. Consequently, Frank had to accept the necessary evil of working for the Greeks, a criminal organization, and helping them transfer drugs through the vote to collect enough money to bribe politicians and senators into constructing a green pier to increase ship traffic at the dying port of Baltimore. Out of a sense of brotherhood, he sacrificed everything. He was even scared to confess to a priest because in his mind he knew he was doing wrong. Not only that, but he was also repeatedly put down by his older brother, and he was said by his older brother that he was no longer a moral person. Without his brother trying to understand the situation and just looking down on his brother Frank. The saddest part is that Sabotka died before being too able to construct the Green Pier. The shutdown he always feared happened, and his people became unemployed and homeless. This was a tragedy of Frank Sabotka, a moral man compromised by the system. The Wire has a lot of stories like this, and the story of Frank Sabotka is only one of those dozens of stories shown in the show that shows the corruption and the tragedies caused by the system and institutions that are inherently flawed. The accumulation of all the stories and the people's true experiences who wrote these stories and experienced it every day makes this show, The Wire, so special. And only when you understand all of this, you will finally understand why The Wire is one of the greatest TV shows of all times.